Welcome to another DragonLance Saga review episode. It is Brocca Pale's Wealth II. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to give you my review of The Puppet King by Douglas Niles. I would like to take a moment and thank the DL Saga members and invite you to consider becoming a member by visiting the link in the description below. You can even pick up DragonLance gaming materials using my affiliate links. Now, this is my perspective only, so if yours differs, that's okay. You can put it in a live chat if you're joining live, or if you're watching this after the fact, put it in the comments. We welcome disparate opinions here. This might be the last place that does. All right, but again, that doesn't necessarily mean that because you share your opinion, people are going to agree with it. But that's okay too. So in any case, Corey, how you doing, man? All right, I did not want to read this book. Hands down, did not want to read it. I was not interested in it. When I read Dragons of Summer Flame, I thought the worst part about it was the Thalas Enthia and Rasha's, basically the Silvanesti Senate, and the guy who is put Gilthas, Lorelanthalassa, and Tanis Half-Elven's son on the throne so that he could be a puppet king. I hated that. I hate the idea of it. It rings just a little bit too real-world connivey senators to me, and I don't want that much real-world, especially the shitty part of real-world, in my Dragonlance. So it really bothered me, and I just hate the idea of heroes that I love, their son being used. Now, the character arc that we see Gilthas going through, of course, in the 5th Age specifically, is great. With the Elven Exiles trilogy, it's great. But before that, when it's just this part, it's just kind of miserable and I hated it. So I did not want to read this book. But I am here to report it's actually really good. And Douglas Niles did it, and it's really good. So he did a good job. Now, the interesting part about this is you get actually more Porthios in this novel than you do Gilthas, which is pretty cool because Porthios has always been that background character that you never really heard about. Now, he is supposed to be the speaker for Silvanesti. He's supposed to be the ruler. And Alhana Starbreeze is supposed to be the ruler of Silvanesti. But in both cases, they had different people rising up and trying to squash the union of Silvanesti and Silvanesti through these two who got married, because that was the whole point. It was a marriage of convenience in order to unify a nation of elves, rather than have these two factions since the Kinslayer Wars before it. However, it clearly never works because the Silvanesti elves are assholes who hate every other race, especially the Silvanesti upstarts. And the Silvanesti are assholes who hate especially the Silvanesti, but in general, everyone else as well. Meanwhile, in the background, which is not really addressed in this story very heavily, but it is brought up once, Lorana and Tanis are actively working to try to unify and create another sort of treaty between the humans, elves, and dwarves. This is important because, as we saw, the Dark Queen in the War of the Lance almost completely dominated all of Ansalon and won because there was no longer a treaty between them. They all just sort of hated each other ever since the Cataclysm. You can argue, justifiably or not, but in either case, it was their lack of unity that allowed the Dark Queen to get a foothold. And so moving forward, Tanis and Lorana really are doing everything they can to unify. Now, this is also something that Alhana and Porthios are proponents of, which is another reason why Silvanesti does not want Porthios to be the speaker, and why Silvanesti does not want Alhana to be the speaker. Because if they do unify everyone, then there is no more racial purity, and there is no... saying these words out loud makes you realize how fascistic, is that a phrasing, the elves actually are. They are like Hitler, straight up. How did he phrase it? The master race. So the Silvanesti think they are the master race, like full stop. And the Silvanesti think that they are also a master race, if not the master race. which is a dark way to look at it, but that's the reality of it. They enslave their Khaganasti brothers and sisters. They have slavery for people who break the law. They have slavery for Quolinesti and other humans and dwarves if they get in their territory. Like, they're horrible, horrible, a horrible species to deal with in Dragonlance. I don't know why they're supposed to be like the good ones. It makes no sense at all. They should be the offspring that, or the creatures that Takhisis put on Krynn, not Paladine, but here we are. So we start, and this whole thing is framed as a series of flashbacks, this whole novel, which is an interesting plot device because it's Samar, which you know as he was once the right-hand man to Porthios, and once Porthios died, then he became the right-hand man of Alhana, and he's basically tasked with protecting Silvanesti, Porthios and Alhana's son. So this is set after all of the events of the Chaos War in the Age of Mortals, where Porthios' son, Silvanesti, and Samar are going to talk to a green dragon. And it's all explained at the very end of it, but initially it's a little bit like, wait, what? What the hell's going on? So they pin a Dragonlance up against this green dragon in his lair in Silvanesti. It's like this offshoot island area of Silvanesti that's not really occupied right now. But the dragon has just been sleeping since the Chaos War, really. And his mate died and stuff. So he's doesn't really have much of a horde, and he's just trying to eke out the rest of his life as peacefully as you possibly can as a dragon. So this green dragon is sort of pinned against a wall by Samar, and Silvanesti is like, look, I want to know about Porthios, my father. You know about him, so talk. And so the whole novel is based around the retelling of events that this dragon witnessed firsthand or heard about after the fact to illuminate Silvanesti about his lost father, as it were. Which is interesting. I really like it. So it starts with Silvanesti sort of Senate leaders approaching the dragons and saying, we want you to assassinate Porthios because we cannot have a unified elven nation. We want Silvanesti to be pure 100%. And so basically what happened is Porthios was sent over to Silvanesti. He's Quolinesti. Alhana was sent over to Quolinesti. She's Silvanesti. And the idea was that each would work in each other's kingdom to bring unity together. Horribly backfired, didn't work at all, and it actually resulted in almost Porthios being slaughtered by the Silvanesti elves through this green dragon. So again, the flashbacks are before the Chaos War, but it's set in after the Chaos War in the Age of Mortals. So it was a little bit confusing to me at first until I got my hands around it, and then it made perfect sense because I was doing the audiobook, and so I assume in the novel there's some sort of delineation visually or through the text that's much clearer than just the audio cues. But in any case, I picked it up. So the dragon failed, obviously, spoiler. This whole review is a spoiler. The dragon failed, and Porthios ended up being captured after the battle and imprisoned by the Silvanesti elves. And in Quolinesti, Alhana was captured by the Thalassenthiya by Rashas in the Senate, and they instilled Gilthas as the speaker because he was malleable and he would do what he's told. And they said, look, if you don't rule, we're going to kill Alhana. And he's a considered human, considered elf, and he's not a monster. And so he's like, I don't want you to kill Alhana. Like, that's horrible. Like, okay, I'll be your puppet king if that's what you need. And then Porthios was told that he needs to give up his emblem that would delineate him as the speaker because they have to do it willingly, or Alhana would be killed. And at this point, Alhana and Porthios had a bit of a turbulent early marriage, but at this point, he actually really loves her, and he finds himself wanting to be the man that she wants. She is still clearly has affection for the lost Sturm Brightblade, And Porthios has learned to really appreciate the legacy that Sturm Brightblade had left and the man that he was. And so he finds himself actively trying to impress upon Alhana that he's that quality of elf, that he is worthy of her affection and love, which is something that I never read anywhere else, or at least I don't remember having read anywhere else, which actually, ironically, humanizes the character so that they are able to be empathized with by the reader. And I really appreciate that. So he ultimately relents, and he's scheduled to be assassinated, but Tanis Half-Elven comes in with some griffins and rescues him from imprisonment. And so they fly off to go deal with Quilonesti, but basically with Alhana now released, she's actually up in Solus giving birth to Silvanesti. That's where Porthios ends up going instead of going directly to Quilonesti. But the Puppet King has been put in place. He has the right of rule, and now Porthios and Alhana are reunited, and it feels so good. Sorry, I had to. And they're just going to basically be like strike assault teams, renegades, like assaulting Quilonesti from the outskirts of its borders, stopping trade deals, wagons that are moving through, and just being a menace to this new and arguably much more fascistic Quilonesti, which I totally agree with, because Quilonesti and Silvanesti have turned into shitholes from what they originally were. This is when the Summer of Chaos is happening, because everything, the entire environment is boiling up. The Knights of Takhisis with the Tarmac are invading the mainland, and this is about the time that the Irida decide to crack open the Grey Gem and release Chaos. So the story is really about Porthios becoming a renegade and Gilthas doing his best to navigate this awful situation that he finds himself in, and the world going through another invasion, but by this time by honorable Knights of Takhisis, which, when it was originally released, was an amazing notion that the evil side could have honor, because the entire concept of Dragonlance was that evil always feeds on itself. This turns that praxis on its head. I don't even know if that was a word. And it becomes a very terrifying thing for all of the people of Krynn, because they cannot resist it. And once they actually dominate your town, like they dominated Calaman, people started prospering. All the murders and the thievery and all of the bandits, it's all been cleaned up by the Knights of Takhisis. And so the rule that they're under is actually not as bad as the absence of them and having to deal with the fallout of the War of the Lance and the Blue Ladies' War and all of the different mercenaries that were just sort of ravaging the land. And so people actually welcome them in after the initial assault or the initial confrontation. And that's what the elves do of Quilonesti. They're faced with this massive onslaught, and the Knights of Takhisis basically make a deal with the Senate, and the Senate, the Thalassynthia of Quilonesti, willingly give up rule without a fight. Say, okay, we heard about how you in Palanthas and in Calaman, how you've done a good thing. We're going to not fight you, and we're going to give it up. But we have this renegade, Porthios, who is, assaulting us. You're going to have to go deal with them. And they try to set him up to be assassinated. Again, Porthios finds his way out of it because he's a badass. And that's when chaos starts to hit Quilonesti. So the Chaos War is invading, and it comes down to a point where the Knights of Takhisis have to allow the Quilonesti elves to stand side by side with them to defend Quilonesti. But then they have to also get Porthios in. So there's this really great scene where Gilthas is meeting with Kensieri? How do you pronounce her name? Carriensere, the Kgonesti servant, who is actually the spy for the renegades. She realizes that Gilthas is actually of the same mindset as Porthios, Alhana, and Tanis Half-Elven. And so she secrets him away to go meet with Porthios. And Porthios is a straight up dick until Gilthas steps up to him physically and verbally. And he earns his respect that way. He's like, you know what? You really are your parents' son. And in that moment, I actually started to like Porthios for the first time because he's always been a total douchebag to everyone. And I don't understand, and they make a point to call it out, Douglas Niles does in this novel, how Porthios, even when Tanis Half-Elven rescues him from imprisonment, is still an asshole to Tanis and still thinks he's less than and a shitty person. He's a hero of the War of the Lance. He's a hero of the Blue Ladies' War. He's trying to unify the nations of Krynn, and Porthios still looks down his nose at him? What kind of an asshole does that? And so I've hated Porthios for so long until this moment where he faces off with Gilthas, and Gilthas couldn't beat Porthios in a fight, but it's just the fact that he stood up to him and showed that he could be a good ruler. And that was enough for Porthios to trust him. And then I started saying, okay, Porthios is not just one-dimensional. There is more to him. You know, between his wanting to impress that he's a good enough elf for Ohana and then his respect to Gilthas, I'm starting to like Porthios. So we have Gilthas and Cariansere. It's so hard to say that name. Cariansere. They actually have sex a couple times in this novel, which is kind of weird. I did not anticipate that. But hey, who doesn't love it? So they're instantly connected with each other, and they were discovered by an agent of Rasha's from the Senate. And before that agent could get back to Rasha's, the leader of the Dark Knights, who is sort of running all of Kolonsti at this point, his name is, I have it right here, Saladak. He kills that agent, so he cannot report to Rasha's about Gilthas conspiring with Porthios. But then he goes to Gilthas and he's like, look, I killed that guy. You should probably thank me for that. But the reason is I don't like Rasha's. I don't like the Senate. They're dirty. I always walk away with this filthy, greasy feeling, and I don't like them. But you have something in you. You could actually be a real leader. And I need a real leader installed here while we're occupying it. So as long as you don't ruffle my feathers, then I will let you rule, and I will give you positions of power that Senate will not give you. And so what can Gilthas do? He has to relent. If he's not going to be the puppet for Rasha's and the Senate, he's going to have to be the puppet of this Knight of Takhisis. But honestly, I think the Knight of Takhisis is the better option. And that's crazy, but it really is, because the other elves are trying to destroy, without even realizing it, the elven nation, and the Knights of Takhisis are trying to keep it around and make sure it's prosperous in their new era of rule. And so, of course, they're going to be the better, as insane as it sounds, the better option. So Gilthas relents, but again, that's when chaos starts hitting, and we deal with the same chaos war situations that we did in the last Thane and in the previous book, and all the books that deal with the chaos war. So you got your fire dragons and your minions and your daemon warriors that wipe people from all of existence and all that stuff. And the battles in this are written really, really well, and they're all exciting and entertaining. It really does frame Samar and Porthios as being super badass characters. So if you could think of it in terms of levels, 18th level is supposed to be the cap for all characters, all player characters in Dragonlance. At 18th level, you're supposed to be removed. I'm talking AD&D rule and second edition rules here. They're supposed to be removed from Krynn altogether and put somewhere else, because Krynn is supposed to be a much lower level than that, controlled world by the gods. And so if we're judging by levels, they're 18th level and everyone else is underneath them, because they're just encounter after encounter surviving, whipping ass, and taking names. And it's awesome to watch. If you care about danger on characters that are going to survive later on, then that could probably be a little bit annoying to you. I didn't mind it. I thought if they really did live and do everything that they had done before this novel, then it makes sense they would be really high level and really powerful. So they, playing characters could play through 2 different modules about the Chaos War in either Saga system or Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition. And so if player characters could fight the minions of chaos, then of course Porthios and Samar could. It just makes sense. So that didn't bother me at all. So when chaos struck, Porthios ends up coming to the side of the Dark Knights and Silvanesti elves, the Silvanesti nation, and they all are unified in fighting them off together for pure survival. It's annihilation if you don't work together. So it's that whole "the enemy of my enemy is my friend" situation. Which I actually really loved in the novel. And that's where this green dragon comes into play. He already tried to assassinate Porthios, but he recognizes if he doesn't side with them and work with them, and in this particular case, protect Porthios, then the Chaos agents are going to completely annihilate them as well as all of the Silvanesti and all of the Dark Knights and stuff. And so this green dragon and his mate all join together, and they actually save Porthios' butt once, which is a really ironic twist because they tried to assassinate him at the very beginning. Ultimately, it ends where Samar and Porthios are flying into the breath of a fire dragon to kill it. The fire dragon does die, and Samar makes it out alive barely, but no one knows where Porthios went. He just sort of was abandoned. And then there's this little footnote at the very end where Porthios was horribly scarred and burned and went into hiding because of it. And just he's going to build up his own little strike team and fight the invaders and occupiers of Silvanesti during the Age of Mortals, all the way up until the Elven Exiles and the conclusion of the Elven Exiles trilogy, which is great. If you haven't read that, you really should, because it's a great trilogy. I cannot wait to get to it in these reviews. So Porthios doesn't become the speaker like he should. Of course, we know that. And Silvanesti and Gilthas, the sons of the 2 people who actually should probably, or the cousins, should be running it, are actually the ones that take it over. Even Silvanesti is pretty much a puppet on his, but it doesn't really address him except for as a framing device to then reflect back on the history, because Silvanesti thinks his father is dead at this point in the novel, I believe. It doesn't ever allude that he, I can't remember exactly. It might have alluded it, but I don't think it did, that he knows his father's alive, because he's pretty much estranged. And throughout all the Age of Mortals, as soon as the Silvanesti elves raise that shield that Guy in Bloodbane convinces them to do, then that's where Alhana has, Silvanesti is on the inside of the shield, Alhana's on the outside, and she knows that Porthios is in a strike team against Silvanesti, but I don't think Silvanesti does. So I think in this particular case, he doesn't know that his dad is alive. And there's this really heartfelt moment where the Knight of Takhisis, Saladak, informs Gilthas about his dad in the High Clerist's Tower. Oh, it kills me. A lot of people complain about the death of Tanis Half-Elven, but I respected it. He gave his life for the son of one of his best friends and a hero of the War of the Lance to defend him, because he knew that kid, there was something about him. He was a linchpin between the Knights of Takhisis and the people standing up against him, against them. And he knew that there was good in him. And so he was constantly trying to get him to be a better man, that a version of himself that his father would have been proud of. And to have him die in defense of that, I think that's justified. I think that's good. And it took insurmountable odds in Tarmac to kill him, the Bruce. And I think that tracks with what it would take to kill Tanis Half-Elven. But to go back to when Gilthas found out, he knew in his heart, he knew that he was going to be told that before it ever even happened. And it's like one of those things where you feel the loss before you're informed about the loss. And I love that idea. I don't think it's real. I mean, some people may be able to for whatever reason, they're so connected to someone else and they just realize something just happened and went wrong. And then they realize that, they might have passed or something like that, or like accidents or something. I don't discount people's individual experiences. I've just never experienced anything like it. So I kind of sort of put it off as like, it's pseudo stuff. It is not real, but if people believe it, then awesome. But in a fantasy novel, it tracks, we have telepathic elves with their griffins. Like this is all nonsense. So let's allow it. You know what I mean? And then when he found out, he was just heartbroken. And I loved it because we've always been presented with this idea of Gilthas as this rebellious youth going off and doing what he wants, even though his parents don't really understand that he's being used. And then when they find out that he's being used, they're sort of torn and heartbroken that he's literally a prisoner of the state, basically. And they're helpless to do anything about it. Their son has just been kidnapped by the Silvanesti nation. And they realize that he is actually a good man, that he is actually trying his best to stand up against his captors, the Thalasynthia, against the occupiers, the Knights of Takhisis, and free his people because he believes in the greater scope of his people, the promise of what his people are and could be. And I love that because there's so few elves like that. It really stands out. You have Lorana and Tanis, but everyone else seems to just be okay with elves being shit asses. And I don't like that. I want them to be good, a good group. And that's why the Elven Exiles was so good, because it unified all the elves finally. And in any case, I had a great time listening to this novel. I'm so glad at the direction it took, because I was so against reading it or listening to it in the first place. But it really did change my mind about the whole occupation and imprisonment of Gilthas. And it made me really appreciate the character even more, even though I really liked him later on in the Elven Exiles trilogy. But, at this period in time, I always sort of disliked him. I just felt like he wasn't living up to his parents. And his parents are just like, it's a bar you can never get over. You know what I mean? I mean, they're the heroes of our first introduction to this entire world. So how could you be better than that, But in any case, if you like the Silvanesti or Silvanesti elves, if you like the Chaos War, if you like the occupation of Silvanesti, or finding out how the Knights of Takhisis were able to occupy all these different nations, that's what this book is all about. And it's great. Do yourselves a favor. This is one of Douglas Niles' best novels he's ever written. It's not the best DragonLance novel I've ever read, but it is worth your time if you enjoy this era and if you enjoy these characters, because he does the heroes justice. He does the characters justice in the time period, and you feel the weight of the world events throughout the entire story. And that's what's so great about Dragonlance, in my opinion, is that, yes, you're going through all of these trials and tribulations, but there's a massive world where all sorts of things are happening at the same time as whatever you're reading about in the moment. And having that awareness on the fringes while you're dealing with that core, it makes it a livable world. It makes it a believable fantasy universe. And Dragonlance does it so very, very well. It does it pretty shitty in some other novels too, but for the most part, it does it so well. And it's one of the reasons why I desperately love this setting. And I hope you do as well. All right. So I really appreciate you tuning in. Corey, Noah, how you doing? Niles knows his elves. Yes, he does. I'm not as familiar with Elder Scrolls, but if they're shitty elves in there as well, then yeah, definitely. They really put Gilthas through it. It's been a long time since you read this, but you felt like it struggled with how pathetic a figure he cut through so much of his plot. Yeah, but he does come out the other end as a real strong leader, which I really, really appreciate. Marco, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in. It's okay. Just check it later when you can. Dave, how you doing? Kermit the Frog will always be the happy, true puppet king, as Mel Brooks says. It's good to be the king. Nice. Partisans, you love War of Souls and the juxtaposition of Gilthas versus Silvanesti. Yeah, I like that too. All right. Well, that is it for this review of The Puppet King by Douglas Niles. What did you think of the Thalas, Enthea, and Rashas? Do you buy Gilthas' willingness to be occupied? And finally, how do you feel about Porthios' end? Feel free to email me at info@dlsaga.com or leave a comment below. I would like to take a moment and invite you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and click the like button. This all goes to help other Dragonlance fans learn about this channel and its content. I also want to take a second and let you all know about my new project. I've already run one actual play, and I have another actual play scheduled soon. I've been developing a system-agnostic dark fantasy campaign called Dire Lands. You can learn more about it on my Evil Live Play YouTube channel. The link is in the description below. So, finally, this channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the DragonLance Saga. Thank you for joining me in that celebration. Thank you for watching. This has been Adam with DragonLance Saga. Until next time, Slàinte No, Dire Lands is not tonight.